Hi, here's Florian from 99 Startups, and I'm today here with Felix. So Felix, introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Felix. I'm the SVP Global Operations at Delivery Hero. Before that, I did many other things. I think most noteworthy and probably relevant to this podcast is the fact that I was the co-founder of Foodpanda, a group which is active in the food delivery space, food ordering, and which raised over $300 million over the course of 4 years. And I was co-founder and COO of that company, so I had a very operational focus while I was in that position.
So Foodpanda had a really impressive 4 times growth every year. So how you think about growth?
I think growth is the most addictive drug that you can hand out to founders, to employees, to people. Growth is fantastic because it's just it just creates a lot of energy around people, and people feel very intrinsically motivated to work hard, and they have a sense of accomplishment. They learn a lot, and they gradually move up in just in experience and management span just by being in the position that they are. So there's no need for like career planning or the type of corporate things that you would need normally to keep people in a company. Just the growth itself is enough to sustain motivation and retention in the company, and excitement and personal growth, etc. So I think on let's say the personal level, growth is simply a gift, especially if it happens over such a long time. On the operational side, of course, it's a huge challenge to master growth and to facilitate it, starting from you have to adapt the organizational structure over time. You have to hire more people. You have to maybe exchange people also in certain positions. You also have to possibly do mergers and acquisitions. You have to acquire companies, which in itself creates a lot of complexity. Also in the long run, from an operational point of view, buying a company is a long-term project. So I think that's very challenging and also very energy consuming. So you will need that energy that you kind of build up as part of a growth story, also to make sure you can harness the growth and you can facilitate it.
So then let's split the problems to one each other. So let's say hiring. How do you think about hiring? What do you focus on if you need people because your growth rides you?
So I think hiring is a huge topic, right? And I think it's in essence very generic what you need to do, and everybody knows and has learned it at some point in university. On the other hand, then actually doing it is something very different because you're confronted with a lot of problems. So what I would like on a general level, I think hiring is a CEO topic for sure. And the more we grew as a company, the more I was focusing on hiring as well. So we really try to allocate 30-40% of our time on hiring. I had on average, I'd say, probably 5 interviews per week for certain applicants. And I mean, I've probably done like 90 or 100 hires together with other parts of the management team. Personally, I mean, I was involved in more. And I think like maybe just trying to capture the essence of these, the learnings that we made there. I think you need to be really rigid on the quality of people. So I would always suggest not to compromise on quality, but to really try to find the best person for that position and not to compromise on it. So that in essence, that means you need a certain throughput in your HR department. So if you want to have a very, very good candidate, then you need a good HR team, a good recruiting team that can really line up for each position 4 or 5 candidates. You should never only have 1 or 2, but more, 3, 4, 5 candidates. So you need a very good head of HR. It's something where like a position in which we invested over time. So it was one of the few positions that we, for example, had a headhunter for. So ironically, for our head of HR position, we had to hire a headhunter to fill that position because it's very difficult to find the right person. We wanted somebody who has a cultural fit, who understands what our cultural DNA is, but on the other hand, also an execution person who could really build up a recruiting funnel where we have enough leads that we generate and then can convert into people. So I think that's one thing. Like, have a good HR team with excellent throughput and really good feeling and a good sense of what's the right type of candidate that you want. And then also personally, I think try to really understand how to structure a job interview, how to pitch and when to pitch. So every job interview at some point turns into pitching mode, right? After you've kind of understood that this is the right candidate and this is the guy that you want to close, you need to switch in your head and go to pitching mode, or you also need to do it from the very beginning and sell the mission, sell the vision of the company, sell yourself, because you might be the boss, right? So that person needs to buy into, okay, I want to work for this guy, I can learn from this guy. So I think strike a good balance between a structured interview to identify the right candidate, but also the right pitch selling mode to then close the candidate. I think it's also very important, and refine with every interview. Always, like, after interview, after process, talk with your colleagues, with your co-CEO, with your co-founder. Okay, what went right, what went wrong? Why didn't we close that person? Was this the right hire or the wrong hire? That's, I think, another aspect that is very important. And then I also believe in doing multiple interviews. So we always had like 2, 3, 4 interviews, in some cases even more. I think companies like Google, they have like an excessive amount of interviews, 7, 8, 9. I think that's, my personal taste, that there's a bit too much, but at least do a couple of interviews. And I think what we also did, we had a very good number awareness of like, we all knew all the metrics that we need to look at. For example, how many leads have we generated last week for developers? Developers was our most scarce resource that we had to hire. So we had to understand how many new leads did we generate, how many interviews have we done, how many people are lined up for the final interview. So have a funnel in which you track the progress. And you can approach it really like a conversion funnel for your product. It's the same thing. So these are the 3 things that I would suggest. Have a good team, a lot of visibility on the numbers, and then finally a good process and a good quality also of interviews that you're conducting.
So next to quality, did you also check for personal culture? So like openness or
cultural fit?
Yeah, culture fit.
Yes,
how did
absolutely.
you approach that?
Absolutely. I think this is something that comes fairly natural, I'd say. Okay. What I've observed is that you always kind of hire the type of personality that you yourself are.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty accurate from what I've noticed, and I think it comes automatic that you will have a sense of sympathy for somebody who's open, who's direct. That's my preference, right? Like somebody who's open, who's direct, who's upfront to also ask me in the job interview, for example, a critical question. So I've noticed Foodpanda underperformed in this country or that country. Why is that the case? I think that's the right mindset. That's what I want. I don't want people who say yay to everything, but I want people who question me, who challenge me, who challenge us, right, and who challenge the company, because you need to challenge yourself on a regular basis as a startup, and you need people that flag certain structural problems, that flag issues. And I always that was always my attitude as a person, and I would say that 70-80% of the people that I hired also reflect that type of personality. It's a bit different if you then move to other markets. For example, if you go to Asia or India, for example, you do have certain types of mentality that do not always match with a Western European type of mindset. So that's something also that I noticed. It's much more difficult to hire in cultures where you don't really have a yardstick for what type of personality is an open-minded or direct person, and what is more like a kind of restrained person. So I think when you move into other territories in terms of hiring, it's always beneficial to include local people that you have in your network. So in our case, since we were with Rocket Internet, we could leverage a lot the contacts that we had from other Asian ventures that were in Asia, and they could point us to the right candidates, and they could also then do a second or third interview to understand whether the person kind of matches what we want to see in a candidate. So it's more challenging in other cultures to do this.
Definitely. And so you're hiring a lot of people, so then how you said that you have like challenges in organization. How you solved that to keep always the organization fit to your needs?
It's probably one of the next to hiring, one of the key questions that you need to answer as a top manager, right?
Yeah.
How do I adapt my structure? How do I shape it with the increase in complexity, with the increase in geographical footprint?
Yeah.
And it's something that I think it's hard to give you a let's say a blanket answer for that, but I think you always need to look at organizational structure and processes together, right? So there's no point in only changing organizational structure, but usually it also means you have to adopt something on the process side, be it a development process, a governance process, decision making, etc. So I think it needs to be changed in close alignment, and it really fully depends on the business model. It depends on your geographical reach. So it's hard to give an answer on that. But the reality is that we discussed this a lot in the management team, and we also adapted a lot over time. And also, like at Delivery here now, it's one of the core topics to define and flesh out the best organizational structure and the best governance model in order to have a fast entrepreneurial decision making process on the ground. So I think it's probably, I would say it's one of the most complex questions of top management. I think hiring is more straightforward. So once you've figured it out, you know how to do it. But organizational challenges, they keep on coming up on a regular basis. Every 6 months, I think you need to challenge what you're doing and how you do it, and understand whether it's still the right way to do it, or do you need to slightly adapt. I think the bigger you become, ideally the smaller the adjustments should be, because they might be very disruptive if it's because there are a lot of people affected. But on the other hand, this is always a bit this day one kind of dogma that if you need to change the structure in order to better serve the customer, in order to be more successful, in order to address a competitive threat, I would always do it. I'd always do it, right? Because it's necessary to be in a position to make the right decisions, even if you are rather large already.
Okay, so as you started with like Foodpanda in Berlin, you are probably more agile as structure, like small teams, autonomous, just delivered. Did it stay agile as it grow, like to all other cities in Germany, for example, or how you would describe it out of your perspective?
I think as a general rule, you definitely lose agility the bigger you become. It's very, I think it's very obvious and very straightforward. It's just, I think the what we talked about before, right? How to adapt the structure. I think adapting the structure has always been geared towards maintaining and preserving a certain level of entrepreneurialism and ownership in the teams. What you have to really prevent from happening is that you grow too much, in the sense of people don't feel empowered anymore, that they are really driving things independently. They don't feel that they have the liberty to decide things and to shape things. Then it's very dangerous, because it can really tip into a corporate type of mindset where people don't feel accountable. They move more into a 9-to-5 type of mindset, and they also feel that they cannot really change, or they don't have so much business impact anymore. And I think that by means of organizational improvements and adjustments, you can try to do damage control to that effect, because it will happen to some degree. It's just naturally going to happen the bigger you become. There's no way around it. But what you can do by means of organizational improvements is you can try to limit that effect. And I think that's a real core top management duty, to make sure that people in your organization still feel that they can achieve something, that they can move things, that they can decide things on their own without having to go through 20 lines of hierarchy, because that kills any entrepreneurial executional type of mindset.
So if you give people more responsibility to reach that, you need to align them and like set them like better goals. Like this is like two together, aligning and goals. So how you do that? Like how you give idea or framework into your company for alignment or goal setting?
Exactly. That's very true, right? When you give more autonomy, you also need to make sure that people, yes, they can decide on their own, but at least they're running into the same direction. They're driving the same topics. And I think there are a lot of frameworks for that, right? So I think OKRs, objectives, key results, is one of it, and it's the one that we're using at Delivery Hero.
Okay.
And I think it's a very good framework.
Yeah.
It helps a lot to facilitate that. Okay, everybody is geared towards one point and towards one goal, and they're driving the same type of things. And you don't have to align every week on who's doing what.
Yeah.
But you have a kind of blind understanding because goals are aligned. So that's the big advantage of it. And another advantage is that you are forced to think a bit more long term than you would do, and you might do in a startup. In a startup, it's always about surviving the next month. Yeah. It's always about how do I solve this problem. You have to do firefighting everywhere, and it gets you a bit out of the firefighting mode and forces you to think about a long term strategy. At least 3 months, of course. After you've done OKRs for some time, you figure out that actually 1 quarter is not the right horizon. You need to plan more like 2 or 3 quarters. Yeah. Because otherwise you have a lot of overhead every quarter to align. But if you do a bit of a more long-term alignment, it's just easier, and it almost turns into a strategy discussion. And I think that's what I like about OKRs. But you also have to be aware that there are downsides of these type of frameworks. So if you only define a certain set of priorities for a quarter, it's always difficult to get something in that needs to be done, even though it wasn't on the OKR list, and you need to basically talk to 3 departments to adjust their OKRs, and then it becomes a bit of an overhead. So I think, and that's why I also believe that OKRs should not be in place from day one.
Yeah,
it's my personal recommendation would not to be too much focused on quarterly targets, but I think as a startup, you still need to be able to be very agile and to respond even more quickly to crisis, to competitive threats, to insights, to product development. So I like this very agile part in the very beginning of a startup. Yeah. I think it's a very fruitful, very important phase to flesh out the company strategy, the company vision. And I think you also need to have, as a founder, the right to say, okay, guys, I changed my mind. Yeah. And we do a pivot, we will do this instead. Yeah. And I think it's all right. I think a founder he has the judgment, and he should have the judgment to do that. And it's his money that is on the line. It's his company that is on the line, and then he shouldn't be required to have OKR discussions on and on to make that pivot. So there's a certain size. I think you will feel as a founder that at some point the people are missing some kind of alignment, that the partners miss alignment. We had that at Foodpanda also, like at some point that we felt we are too much focused only on the next months, and we don't have a long-term vision. People are missing a bit, what's coming in 1 or 2 quarters. And that's also when we decided to introduce this type of quarterly target setting, and also where more and introduced a long-term strategy with an annual strategy, what we want to achieve. So I think you need to then build a bit more over it, but don't do it too early from my point of view.
Yeah, makes absolutely sense. Interesting. So what is your biggest problem today? What's the biggest problem you're facing today in your position?
So I think the biggest problem of a large structure is complexity. That's always what you will. I think you can ask any top manager in a large corporation. They will ask you, or they will tell you that the biggest problem is speed, right? And speed, or the lack of speed. And the speed is negatively impacted by complexity, by the size of an organizational structure. And I think, again, coming back to what I said earlier, what we're trying to achieve here is, what are the type of structural decisions that we need to make in order to be faster? How can we be faster? I mean, we'll never be as fast as a startup again. It's impossible. Yeah. But of course, we would like to understand, maybe we can get 10%, 20% of that speed back that we used to have as a startup. And that's why we're discussing structural measures. We're discussing, for like a lot of discussion in Delivery Heroes around what are the central type of services that we want to provide, what is done and executed in the countries, to really find the right split, the right trade-off between centralization and local execution. Yeah. And I think that's why Delivery Hero is also very strong. I think we have very strong people in the countries that have a lot of ownership, and that's also why we're successful in our markets and why we're market leading, because they are able to make the right type of decisions fast. They don't have to go through, the CEO for every for every little purchase order, but they can really do a lot of stuff themselves, and they also have a certain level of technology ownership, which I think is also important. If you have a team that doesn't have technology ownership, they're very limited in what they can do. Technology is a core integral part of our business. On the other hand, we're also providing central services out of Berlin that we believe are very standardized, that every country can use, and I think it's a very, very good strategy. It's very, very unique and very good strategy.
So you mix it up. So part of the software they can develop their own on the country, and part of them you get services out of Berlin. Yeah, makes sense. So if you say the country managers are really independent, so how you align them then? How you the same, like how you set goals for them, how you make sure they're running in the right direction?
Well, we do have the OKR process, right? I think that's one, and of course, I mean, naturally, there's a full set of metrics that we are tracking and that we're also agreeing on as a target for the countries. So I think there's a comprehensive framework to make sure that everything happens in strong alignment. So there are a lot of people also supporting that process, and therefore I'd say OKR is the cornerstone for that framework that we're using.
Okay. So let's say we are really young. We're coming out of university, or we're thinking to go to university or not, and we want to build something similar, like not the same food business, that wouldn't work, but let's say we try to build something which has also a high growth. Would you recommend us to do, or what would you recommend us to do? Like what we need to set in place that we have the highest chance to succeed?
I think it all starts from the market, to be honest.
Okay.
And I think this is something that I pick up in a lot of discussions also with founders, or like people like trying to think of like what's the thing that I want to do. Think in global markets. I really think about like what's a segment that is underutilized, undersupplied, and I would really start from a market that is sizable, that really can generate a lot of revenue. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that you move into a space which can be like maybe a couple of 100,000 euros, maybe a couple of million euros revenue is just not enough to really be really big, right? So you need to think about a bigger market. And I also wouldn't neglect markets that have maybe one or two dominant players. I think there are many examples of new players, like Lyft in the US, for example. We thought that Uber, had killed the market, and then Lyft came. So I think they're always in every. Wayfair is another example in the US. So they're doing like IKEA kind of business, and everybody thought with Amazon, IKEA, like the market is closed. And you can find a lot of companies that have come up in a space, payment. Just think about payments. There are dozens who have conquered micro segments in a very large market, right? A very large market. And the market is big enough, it can really sustain perpetual and consistent growth over time. If you pick a segment that is too small, maybe only applicable in Germany, maybe only in 2 or 3 European markets, it will not get you to a large type of company. So I think pick the right market and pick the right model in the market. Really try to understand, okay, what's the segment in the market that is being underutilized. I think it's a bit difficult if you come out of university to spot these opportunities, right? Because you come more from an academic background. Yeah. I think it's very difficult to start up as a successful entrepreneur from university. It's just my personal perception on this topic. I'm a late founder, actually. I only founded when I was in my late 30s, right? I did a lot of things before, and I also had like a small venture before when I was a student and so on in a certain segment. But the big thing only really came in my mid 30s. So I think it really depends a bit on what's the segment, and if you work maybe 3 or 4 years in a certain type of industry, be it consulting, be it at a telco, be it at some kind of technology company, be it in a payment company, you tend to pick up certain things. You tend to pick up problems that consumers are facing and that are not being solved. And I think that should be the hook then to say, okay, this is something that we can actually scale. So I think spending 3 or 4 years before founding is a good idea to pick up the basic basic understanding of how to set up a business, how to operate a business, and also developing an idea. It doesn't need to happen from day one. I think in a you should probably pick a company that is not too corporate. So again, if you're too corporate, you might be too detached from the market side of the business. If you work in an administrative function somewhere in 100,000 people organization, the chance that you will pick up something is very slim. But if you are in a smaller company, maybe a startup in Berlin or a technology company, I think the chances are much bigger that you will find something. Yeah. So I think I would suggest to pick some job which drives your learning. And I think a good age to actually found is then late 20s, maybe 30. 30 is for me like the perfect age, because you still have a lot of energy to drive stuff, and you've picked up some professional experience. And you won't face, you'll be able to deal with problems also in the first 2 years of your startup career much better than if you're a graduate. As a graduate, I think you still need to learn so much. Now, I've also seen a lot of graduates that came out of great universities, like perfect grades, but they were put into management positions too quickly, and they failed very quickly because they just didn't know how to handle people, how to hire, how to define processes. There just was a lack of practical understanding. So I think the safer strategy is to do a bit of a detour and take 3-4 years of a normal kind of career.
Yeah, this makes sense. So, because like startup work or like also a big job in Deliveroo, it's like really stressful. So how you yourself find the mix between your work and free time?
So I mean, everybody has his way of compensating for stress. I really don't have a choice because I have a family, so that has to be my valve or whatever to release stress. And for me, it's working great. So I love to spend time with my family, and I think that's a great way to log out the business. And I mean, kids keep you busy, but of course, that's not something that you can do overnight. So something that takes a bit of planning to do. But I think also you can do sports, you can do whatever, right? I mean, I think it's just important to also have moments of decompression. It doesn't need to be like daily, weekly, or monthly, like we discussed at Foodpanda. I think we had 3 very intense years, and there was really no break in between. But for example, I always did my vacation, so I always I always took those 25 days a year and just took off with my family. And even though I still checked emails and did a few calls, that really gave me a lot of energy to kind of come back to the business and then start working and driving stuff again. So that's probably another tip I would give everybody, is to take time off during the year. It's worth it. And just know like what you need to do, be it meditation, sports, whatever, to be able to let go just for a couple of hours, have a good sleep, and then go back energized. But I think that's also a bit of a founder dilemma, that people who are founders, they will always be committed and hungry to drive the business, and they don't want to do anything else really, at least for some time. So because of the excitement, right, that it delivers. But you'll find your way of relaxing.
How do you, like, there's a really good advice, like to just take your 25 days off, but how do you know that now it's the right time to take these days off? Because there's probably always arguments why not now. How did you? I think
that the time is never right. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's a basic thing. It's never right. I mean, yes, there's some key projects like a fundraise or whatever where you should probably be in the office, but honestly, that's maybe a couple of weeks per year where you are absolutely not dispensable in the office. I think the other important factor is have a second line that is strong. Don't have people that you have to micromanage every day. I mean, it's like it's anyways a management principle of mine to build teams that are self-sustainable and that I can obsolete myself over time. That was always my management principle, and I strongly believe in that. But that also means, of course, as a nice upside, that if you want to take vacation, you can, because you have people that can take decisions, and if they can, they give you a call. It's a 5-minute call, and then things are moving again. So don't think that you are indispensable at every minute of the day. That's not the case.
Yeah, really good point. How do you invest in yourself? Like, how do you educate yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit lazy in that, to be honest. So, I mean, I was lucky enough, like in my first 5 years of my career, I was a consultant at Roland Berger, and we had tons of seminars and trainings and so on. And I think that was really valuable for me, because I was at an early stage of my career, and I really enjoyed those 2-day sessions, talking about presentation skills, about negotiation skills and so on. And I picked up a lot of soft skills, I'd say, over time. And ever since, I learned on the job so much that my feeling was that I don't have the time, or I don't need to go to these type of trainings. So I haven't done many trainings lately. I probably should. I do read books, right? So I read books occasionally. I read a lot of news and kind of internet publications on certain topics. If I have a topic that I'm interested in, that I want to solve, I do research. So I research a lot around company structures and this OKR type of model, or around other methodologies that help you to manage better. And I also meet people a lot then. So I have a good network by now. That's one of the advantages of growing older as a manager, that you build up a network. And whenever I have specific questions, I usually have 2, 3, 4 people that have dealt with the same type of issue. And then I call them and I meet them. So building a network, I think, is also very, very crucial. And I mean, to be honest, I would say 80% of the input that I get from others to improve what I'm doing is coming from people that I know, or from discussions from people that I meet, rather than from a book reading. So that's not my primary source. It's always been like that for me. I'm not the most academic person, I'd say. I'm more a people person, and I just like to go out, meet people, understand, and then I think it's much more efficient to spend 1 hour with an amazing manager who has already solved a problem that you can discuss your topic with individually, right? This is my problem and I need a solution for this. What would you propose? It's much more valuable than having to go through like 2, 3, 4 books.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you do extra reviews from each day, or does it just happen on the go?
Reviews? What do you mean, like reviews of people?
Like thinking about yourself, like how's it going and where to go next and what you do right or wrong, or you don't need to do it and you just...
I think it happens automatically. I'm a very, I'd say, but maybe other people will have different opinions, but I would say I'm a pretty reflective person. So I think you can criticize me also harshly. I have people criticizing me all day, not all day, but like frequently. And I like that. I enjoy that. I like being challenged. I like somebody telling me, I think what you're doing is wrong. I should doing it in another way. So... And I'm also trying to understand if a situation has a turnout that I don't think is a good turnout. I always try to understand what could I have done differently. So that reflects is never, but I did everything right and it's somebody else's fault. But it's rather, okay, I don't like this outcome. What could I have done differently to contribute to a better outcome? And I think this is how you should approach management and a company in general. Be open to criticism. And always try to reflect on, okay, what can I do better next time? Learn from your mistakes. Yeah,
makes sense. So, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book? Wow, I mean many books. I read mostly fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, but you were probably referring to non-fiction, I guess.
No, you're free. You can also tell your favorite fiction books. Why not?
Just trying to think of the English name.
You can also say German. I translate it later. That's fine.
Okay, no, I think the English name is The Kindly Ones.
Okay.
It's a book about the Second World War and the Holocaust. It's also a book about Berlin to a certain degree. So it's by Jonathan Littell, I believe. That's probably my favorite book, right? Okay, that I think is a very fascinating and then also shocking book to read, but a very good read. And I liked as a non-fiction book, I would recommend Business Adventures.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty good book about the disruption of certain industries in mostly the 50s, 60s, 70s. There was, I think it's by a university professor, I've forgotten the author, but he basically singled out certain instances or situations where industries were disrupted by means of technology, by means of black swans, whatever, and then how people reacted to that. And I think that's a very, very interesting book to read, because it just tells you, that everything's repeating. Yeah. And if you think you will not be disrupted or you cannot be disrupted, you're very wrong, because everybody can be disrupted all the time. And I think this was something that also gave me a lot of insight and also to some degree a certain comfort that, okay, you're not the only one who has dealt with this type of situation. It's something normal.
That's cool. So the last question is, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what for advice would you give to yourself?
I think my advice would be bold, and don't wait too long. So 3-4 years after uni is enough, and then start something. Don't wait too long to start. And if you fail once or twice, it's fine. You'll learn a lot, while doing that, and then do the next thing. I think it's still early days for the internet age and the fifth industrial revolution that we're facing, and there's so much opportunity out there, and I would suggest to everybody to try to get a piece of it. And if I would be in my 20s, I would definitely found something. I think that's the greatest thing you can do and the most exciting adventure.
Awesome. Do you have something for the end you want to tell, or we didn't point out?
No, I think we talked about a lot of topics. No, I think let's continue another time around other subjects, and so I hope that some of your listeners will pick up some advice here.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Until next time.